Hello my dear students. Today's lecture is about the ascending tracts of the spinal cord. My focus will be making the concepts clear and comprehensive so that you get rid of rata and apply these concepts in clinical and applied scenarios. Ascending tracts, the job is transfer the information from receptor to the central nervous system. For this, these tracts require 3 neurons. There are various categories of the ascending tracts, but the neurons are fixed, 3 neurons. These 3 neurons have got some common characteristics, so that I label as principles. 3 neurons, 3 principles. Best way to study the ascending tract is study the 3 neurons and have best concepts. And always remember, key to studying neuroanatomy is always questions yourself, where is the neuronal cell body? You will find neuroanatomy very much easy and interesting. So let's start our lecture now.
First of all, I'll talk about the basic functioning of the central nervous system so that we should have better concepts. Central nervous system receives information from the environment via the receptors, and after interpretation it generates an order and action that is known as the response, which is delivered to the effectors. So this is the basic functioning of the central nervous system. The receptors has got two categories. The receptor can be exteroreceptors when it provides information about the external environment, and these are mostly present inside the skin. The receptor can be the interoreceptors when it provides information about the internal environment of the body, and these are basically present in the mucosa of the tubal systems of the body. Likewise, effector has got two categories. It can be a voluntary effector like the skeletal muscle, and it can be a involuntary effector like the smooth muscle, like the cardiac muscle and the gland. Here I can easily demonstrate the two functional domains of the nervous system. One functional domain is the somatic nervous system, also known as the voluntary nervous system, which has got exteroreceptors and the voluntary skeletal muscles for its functioning. Other functional division or domain of the central nervous system is the involuntary nervous system, visceral nervous system, or also known as the autonomic nervous system. This division has got interoreceptors and the involuntary effectors for its functioning. Here I can also show you the nervous system has got 4 functions. 2 are the afferent functions that are performed by exteroreceptor and the interoreceptors. This function performed by exteroreceptor is known as the general somatic afferent, and this function performed by interoreceptor is known as the general visceral afferent. So these two are the basic domains of the nervous system: somatic nervous system, voluntary nervous system, or the involuntary nervous system, visceral nervous system, autonomic nervous system. Likewise, we have got two functions in the effectors. One is the voluntary skeletal muscle known as the general somatic efferent, and the involuntary effectors, their function is coded as the general visceral efferent. So these 4 are the general components or general functions of the central nervous system. My today's lecture, that is the ascending tracts of the spinal cord, is basically the detail about the general somatic afferent component, how the information travels from exteroreceptors and reaches the central nervous system. The detail of this component is known as the ascending tracts of the spinal cord. That is my today's lecture. So today's lecture is about the ascending tracts of the spinal cord. These are the sensory spinal cord tracts. This is basically the detail about the general somatic afferent component. In general somatic afferent component, we have got a stimulus that is perceived by the exteroreceptors, and from the exteroreceptors, neurons will carry this information to the central nervous system. We have got various types of the stimulus which are carried by different ascending tracts. So ascending tracts has got a classification I'll talk about shortly, that is based upon the type of the stimulus. The stimulus is carried by exteroreceptors. The exteroreceptors also has got various categories. I'll talk about the classification of the exteroreceptors at the end of this lecture. So now let's talk about the classification of the ascending tracts. That is dependent upon the type of the stimulus.
So let's talk about the sensations or the stimulus that is perceived by the stereoreceptors, and this is the job of the ascending tracts. Number one, pain and temperature that is perceived by the stereoreceptors of the skin. Number two, crude touch and pressure that is also perceived through the skin stereoreceptors. Number three, fine touch, vibration, 2-point tactile discrimination, and last is the conscious proprioception. Conscious proprioception is the muscle joint sense, awareness about the tone and position of our muscles when we perform different actions. This conscious proprioception, muscle joint sense, can be unconscious. So we will write this as separate entity, unconscious proprioception. So these are the different categories of the stimulus or the sensations. Now I'll show you various categories of the ascending tracts. When it's pain and temperature, the ascending tract is lateral spinothalamic tract. When it's crude touch and pressure, the ascending tract is anterior spinothalamic tract. And when it's fine touch, vibration, 2-point tactile discrimination, conscious proprioception, the ascending tract is known as posterior white column tract. And when it's unconscious proprioception, this is carried by the Spinocerebellar tract. The Spinocerebellar tract can be anterior spinocerebellar tract and can be posterior spinocerebellar tract. Both has got same function. They carry the unconscious proprioception. Ascending tract receive information from the exteroreceptors, and from here the information will ascend through the spinal cord and will reach the brain. In the brain, this information has got two destinations. The destination can be the cerebellum, and the destination can be the higher brain, that is the cerebral hemisphere parietal lobe. So we have got two destinations of the ascending tracts. It can be cerebellum, it can be cerebral hemisphere. When it's cerebellum, the information is known as the subcortical. Subcortical mean this is not reaching the cortex, cerebral cortex, and when it reaches the cerebral cortex, this information is known as this tract is known as the cortical tracts. So these three tracts, these are the cortical tracts, and these two tracts, anterior spinocerebellar tract and posterior spinocerebellar tracts, are the subcortical tracts. So the ascending tracts has got two divisions, cortical and the subcortical. Cortical has got three tracts and subcortical has got two tracts. In the cortical ascending tracts, information moves from exteroreceptors and reaches the cerebral hemisphere. This information is in our consciousness. We are well aware of what is happening in the environment. In the subcortical ascending tracts, information moves from exteroreceptor and reaches the cerebellum. This information is used for the functioning of the central nervous system, but this information is in our subconscious and we are not aware of what is happening in the environment. So this is the difference between the cortical senses and the subcortical senses. For the information to move from receptor and reach the cerebral cortex, we require three neurons. Whether the information is starting from our foot or it's starting from our neck, this doesn't matter. What matters is the rule, and the rule says we want three neurons for the ascending tracts. These three neurons are named as first order neuron, second order neuron, and the third order neuron. Some books has written this first order neuron as neuron 1,
or the primary neuron, and the second order neuron as the neuron 2 or the secondary neuron, and the third order neuron as the neuron 3 or the tertiary neurons. So these are the different names given to these three neurons. For the subcortical tract, for the transfer of the information, we require two neurons, first order and second order neuron. There is no third neuron in the subcortical tracts, as this tract will end at the cerebellum. All the cortical ascending tracts consist of three neurons. But what is meant by three neurons and three principles? This means that neuron 1, neuron 2 and neuron 3, they have got some common characteristics and some common anatomy whatever the tract is. So I mention these common characteristics as a principle. Neuron 1 will have a principle, neuron 2 will have a principle and neuron 3 will have a principle. First of all, always keep in mind, neuron 1 is the nerve that is connected with a receptor. Neuron 1 destination is neuron 2, neuron 2 destination is neuron 3, and neuron 3 destination is the area 312 over the parietal lobe. So what is the principle of the neuron 1? The principle is that it will always be a pseudounipolar neuron and it will be present outside the central nervous system or outside the spinal cord. It will have a peripheral fiber and a central fiber. Peripheral fiber will be connected with the receptor and central fiber will get entry into the spinal cord. Here the job of the central fiber is to find the neuron 2. So what is the principle of neuron 2? The principle of neuron 2 is that wherever it is present, it may be present in the spinal cord, it may be present in the brain stem. Wherever it is present, its principle is that it will cross the midline. Crossing the midline means if it is present on the right side, it will move to the left side. After crossing the midline, it will ascend. It will ascend and it will move towards the neuron 3. It will reach its destination. Neuron 2 destination is neuron 3, which is present in the thalamus. So neuron 2 will cross and ascend till the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron. So this is the third order neuron whose destination is the parietal lobe sensory cortex area 312. So what is its principle? The principle is that all the tracts third order neuron is present in the thalamus, whether it's the anterior spinothalamic tract, lateral spinothalamic tract, posterior white column tract. All the tracts third order neuron is present in the thalamus, and after the thalamus, the third order neuron is independent of the tract. It doesn't matter whatever the tract was. Now neuron 3 will move toward the destination according to a new plan. What is that plan? That plan is according to the homunculus. What is homunculus and what is plan of homunculus? I will explain shortly, but I will repeat what is the principle of neuron 3. All the neuron 3 of all the tracts are present in the thalamus. Whatever the tract is, it doesn't matter. From here, the fiber will move toward the destination according to a new plan, that is according to the homunculus. I will explain shortly. Now the first order neuron. The first order neuron receives information from the receptor and its destination is the second order neuron. It will synapse with the second order neuron. First order neuron of all the sending tracts has got one anatomy, or I would say that it has got a rule. The rule is that first order neuron will always be a pseudounipolar neuron. And this pseudounipolar neuron is located in the dorsal root ganglia. This is the dorsal root ganglia. Here we have the cell body of the pseudounipolar neuron. It has got a fiber that divides into a peripheral fiber and a central fiber. The peripheral fiber is connected with the receptors. Here it takes the information, receives the information, and the central fiber gets entry into the central nervous system and anasmos with the second order neuron, that is its destination. So I will repeat, note down, First order neuron of all the sending tracts is always a pseudounipolar neuron, and location is the dorsal root ganglia. It has got a peripheral process which takes information from the receptor, and it has got a central passage that will synapse with the second order neuron that will enter the central nervous system. There is a special fact about the dorsal white column tract. The dorsal white column tract second order neuron is present in the medulla. Second order neurons of dorsal white column tract is not present in the spinal cord like all other ascending tracts. And first order neuron destination is the second order neuron. It's the job of the first order neuron to find out the second order neuron and synapse with it. So, in case of the dorsal white column, central process of the pseudounipolar neuron will not enter the gray matter. Instead, it will ascend in the dorsal white column. That's why its name is dorsal white column tract. It will ascend in the dorsal white column till the medulla, where it will find its second order neuron and it will synapse with the second order neuron in the medulla. This second order neuron in medulla is named as Gracile nucleus and the Cuneate nucleus. I will explain shortly when I will talk about the second order neuron. But here note down, first order neuron of all the sending tracts is present in the dorsal white column, and the central process will find the second order neuron in the spinal cord dorsal horn gray matter. Here the first order neuron will find the second order neuron in all the sending tracts. Only in the dorsal white column tract the second order neuron is present in the medulla. So the first order neuron will not end in the spinal cord, it will reach medulla to synapse with the second order neuron. Another important fact to note down here is that first order neuron will ascend and will synapse with second order neuron in the medulla, but it will not cross the midline. And now the second order neuron of the cortical ascending tracts, that is the anterior spinothalamic tract, lateral spinothalamic tract, and the posterior white column tract. The second order neuron starts after the first neuron and its destination is the third neuron. It will synapse with the third neuron. Note down, all the third neurons of the cortical tracts are located in the thalamus. All the third neurons of the cortical tracts are located in the thalamus, and here they are named as the ventroposterolateral nucleus. There is a common rule for all the second order neurons, and that rule is it will cross and ascend. It will cross and ascend till the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron. This is very important. It will cross and ascend. The anterior spinothalamic tract second order neuron is present in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, gray matter here. And now it will cross the midline and it will reach the anterior part of the spinal cord, white matter. Hence the name is anterior spinothalamic tract. From here it will ascend and it will reach the brainstem. It will cross the brainstem and will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron. Likewise, the lateral spinothalamic tract is very much similar. It has got the cell body in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord here. Now the second order neuron will cross and will reach the lateral aspect of the spinal cord, white matter. Hence its name is lateral spinothalamic tract. From here this neuron, second order neuron, will ascend and will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron. Now the posterior white column tract, whose cell body is not present in the spinal cord, and first order neuron will ascend and will reach the medulla, where it will find the second order neuron in the medulla. First order neuron will synapse with the second order neuron in the medulla. The second order neuron in the medulla is known as the gracile nucleus and the cuneate nucleus. The second order neuron will now follow the principle, and the principle is cross and then ascend. So by crossing and ascend, it will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron. So I will repeat, the second order neuron of the cortical tracts, it connects the first order neuron with the third order neuron, and the principle, the rule is it will cross and ascend. The cell body of the lateral and the anterior spinothalamic tract is present in the dorsal horn of the gray matter. From here the second neuron will cross and will reach on the front and the lateral aspect of the spinal cord. And from here, it will ascend and it will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron known as the ventroposterolateral nucleus. But for the posterior white column tract, we don't have cell body in the spinal cord, we have got the cell body in the gracile and the cuneate nucleus. So the first order neuron will ascend without crossing and will reach the medulla, where it will synapse with the gracile and the cuneate nucleus of the second order neuron of posterior white column tract. From here, the second order neuron will ascend, but before ascend, it will cross the midline. It will cross and ascend and will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron. So this is all about the second order neuron. Now the third order neuron, whose cell body is present in the thalamus, and here the cell body is known as the ventroposterolateral nucleus. And the destination of the third order neuron is the parietal lobe of the cerebral hemisphere, and in the parietal lobe, this area is known as the post-central gyrus. This area is also known as the somatosensory cortex and also known as the Broadman area 312. Before going into detail, I'd like to explain the cerebellar area location and the homunculus. Where is this cerebral area and what is meant by the homunculus? So this is the superlateral aspect of the cerebral cortex. Over the surface, we have got a deep groove, deep sulcus known as the central sulcus. Over the front of the sulcus, this hole is the frontal lobe, and behind the central sulcus, this is the parietal lobe. In front of the central sulcus, parallelly, we have got another sulcus that is known as the precentral sulcus. Likewise, behind the central sulcus, we have got another parallel sulcus known as the post-central sulcus. In between the sulci, we have the gyrus. This is a gyrus known as the precentral gyrus present in the frontal lobe, and this is the motor cortex. Likewise, this is also a gyrus known as the post-central gyrus that is present in the parietal lobe, and this gyrus is known as the sensory cortex. Over the sensory cortex, there is representation of the body. That representation of the body is known as the sensory homunculus. Likewise, over the motor cortex, body representation is known as the motor homunculus. So the homunculus has got two categories, a sensory homunculus and a motor homunculus. I will further explain over this diagram. So look at here, this is the top view of the cerebral cortex. This is the central sulcus. So here is the precentral gyrus, that is the motor cortex. And behind the central sulcus, here we have got the post-central gyrus, that is the sensory cortex. There is a map of the body of the motor cortex and there is a map of the body of the sensory cortex. But this map has got some rules. The rule for the sensory cortex is that size of the body part is directly proportional to its sensitivity. If the body area is more sensitive, then it will have a larger area over the sensory cortex. If body area is less sensitive, then it will have a less area over the sensory cortex. You can see here the body parts are shown. The sequence of body part is also not like they are present in the body. We have got leg here, then we have got trunk here, then we have got the arm, hand, then we have got face, and then we have got the tongue here. You can see that we have got a lesser area for the leg and the trunk, but we have got a larger area for the hand and fingers, and we have got a larger area for the face, because hand, fingers and the face are much more sensitive than the legs and the trunk. Now look at here, this is the motor cortex, motor homunculus. Here we also have the body map. Over the motor cortex, the size of the body part depend upon the effectors present in that part and how much we use that effector. So the size is directly proportional to the use of that muscle in that area. So this is the sensory homunculus and this is the motor homunculus. Sensory homunculus is the destination of the cortical ascending tracts. The cortical ascending tracts will end at the sensory homunculus that is present in the sensory cortex. So now move to the next slide. So let's suppose this is the lateral spinothalamic tract, second order neuron. This is the anterior spinothalamic tract, and this is the posterior white column tract. All the tracts, second order neuron, destination is the thalamus, third order neuron. From here, they will follow the destination. So what is the rule of the third order neuron? The rule is it will follow homunculus. What does that mean? That it will follow homunculus. So the homunculus is the body representation of the postcentral gyrus. We have an area for the foot, we have an area for the leg, we have an area for the trunk, and we have an area for the upper limb. So all the information about the upper limb that is present in the posterior white column, that is present in the anterior spinal tract, and that is present in the lateral spinal tract will reach the upper limb area. It doesn't matter what was the tract behind, all the fibers will reach the upper limb area. Likewise, all the information about the trunk, whether it is present in the posterior white column tract, anterior spinal tract, or the lateral spinal tract, it will reach the trunk area. Likewise, information about the leg will reach the homunculus that represent the leg area, and all the information about the foot will reach the foot area of the homunculus. So the third order neuron is a special neuron. It doesn't depend upon the type of the cortical tract. It doesn't matter whatever the cortical tract was. What matters is the homunculus, how the body is represented over the homunculus, and all the fibers belonging to a specific area of the body will reach that area. Whether those fibers are present in the lateral spinothalamic tract or the anterior spinothalamic tract or the posterior white column tract, all these fibers will reach that area. So the third order neuron is homunculus specific, or I'll say that it is area specific. Now I'll add some more detail in the ascending tracts anatomy. This detail is about the naming the neurons and the fibers of these tracts when they travel through the destination. First of all, the anterior and the lateral spinothalamic tract. These two tracts are sometimes studied together and the name is anterolateral spinothalamic tract. The reason is that these two tracts have got very little difference, so we can study these two tracts together. First order neuron of this anterolateral spinothalamic tract is present in the dorsal root of the spinal cord here. This is a pseudounipolar neuron named as dorsal root ganglia, and this is a false ganglia. Second neuron of this system is present in the dorsal gray matter, dorsal horn of the spinal cord, and this second neuron here is named as the substantia gelatinosa. We have got 31 segments of spinal cord. An important thing is that substantia gelatinosa is present throughout the spinal cord. It's present in all the segments of the spinal cord. This means that whenever the spinal nerve will get entry into the spinal cord, the first order neuron will find the second order neuron at the same level. The only difference between two tracts is that the second order neuron will cross the midline and will ascend in the lateral white column when it is lateral spinothalamic tract, and it will ascend in the anterior white column when this is the anterior spinothalamic tract. Ascending in the spinal cord, these two tracts will reach the brainstem. Here, these two tracts will merge together and will have a similar course till the destination. In the brainstem, they merge together and ascend in a ribbon-shaped pattern. This ribbon-shaped pattern of ascending in the brainstem is known as spinal lemniscus. Crossing the brainstem, second order neuron will reach the thalamus. Here it will synapse with the third order neuron. In the thalamus, the third order neuron is named as the ventroposterolateral nucleus. The third order neuron will move from here and will reach the destination, and the destination is the Brodmann area 312 postcentral gyrus of the parietal lobe. Moving towards the area 312, the third order neuron passes through two areas of the cerebral hemisphere. First is the internal capsule and the other is the corona radiata. So this is all about the three neurons of the anterolateral spinothalamic tract. Now, naming the neurons and fibers of the posterior white column tract. This posterior white column tract is also known as the dorsal column tract, gracile and cuneate pathway, and also known as the gracile cuneate medial lemniscus pathway. All these names are relevant to its anatomy. This tract has got first order neuron in the dorsal root of the spinal cord here. This is a pseudounipolar neuron, and this neuron is named as the dorsal root ganglia, that is a false ganglia. The first order neuron will enter the spinal cord but will not find the second order neuron in the spinal cord. So it will move in the dorsal white column till the medulla oblongata. So these fibers will ascend in the posterior white column, and while ascending in the posterior white column, these fibers will make two bundles of neurons. The fibers will collect in a medial bundle that is known as the gracile fasciculus, and then fibers will move together in another bundle that is known as the cuneate fasciculus, present lateral to the gracile fasciculus. The reason is that fibers that first get entry into the spinal cord, they are the fibers that are coming from the lower body, especially the lower limb. Till the level of the T6, these fibers merge together and make one bundle. This bundle is present medially and is known as the gracile fasciculus. After T6, the fibers will enter the spinal cord, but they will make a separate bundle of fibers, separate bundle of neurons lateral to this gracile fasciculus. This bundle is known as cuneate fasciculus, dealing with the upper body and especially the upper limb. So we can say that gracile fasciculus is for the lower limb and cuneate fasciculus is for the upper limb. Fibers in both the bundles will ascend till they reach the brain stem. Here they will have second order neuron. In front of the medial bundle there will be neurons known as the gracile nucleus, and in front of the lateral bundle there will be second order neuron known as the cuneate fasciculus. So there are separate bundle of second order neurons in front of the gracile fasciculus and the cuneate fasciculus. In front of gracile fasciculus they are known as the gracile nucleus, and in front of the cuneate fasciculus they are known as the cuneate nucleus. So these are the second order neuron. So they will cross the midline and will ascend. This is happening in the brain stem, and we know when in the brain stem the fibers will ascend, they will make a ribbon, and this ribbon is known as the medial lemniscus. Anterolateral spinothalamic tract has got spinal lemniscus, and this posterior white column has got the medial lemniscus. Now fibers in the medial lemniscus will reach the thalamus, where they will find the third order neuron, and this third order neuron is known as the ventroposterolateral nucleus. The third order neuron will move from here and will reach the destination, that is the area 312, the postcentral gyrus of the parietal lobe. During its course, these fibers will pass through two regions of the cerebral hemisphere. First region, this narrow one, is known as the internal capsule, and when they spread out, this area is known as the corona radiata. This crossover, that is known as the decussation, is at the level of the brainstem, so we name this crossover, this decussation, as the sensory decussation. So this is the anatomy, the course of the posterior white column tract. Before discussing further tracts, let me show you structures present in this diagram. This is the transverse section of the spinal cord. In the center we have got this grey matter, and around the grey matter we have got the white matter. In the grey matter we have got the neurons, and here we have got the synapse or relay of the neurons. Around the grey matter we have got the white matter, where the tracts can ascend or descend. Therefore, the white matter is used for the trafficking purpose, for the transport purpose of the tracts. From each segment of the spinal cord, we get two roots. One is the dorsal root, one is the ventral root. Dorsal root has got this ganglia, and these two roots unite together to form the spinal nerve. We've got 31 spinal nerves. Now I'll show you the ascending tracts that are present in the white matter. This is the posterior white column, which has got the posterior white column tract, which has got two bundles, a medial bundle and a lateral bundle. The medial bundle is Gracile fasciculus and lateral bundle is the Cuneate fasciculus. In these bundles, we have got the first order neuron, and that neuron is uncrossed. This means that over the right side of the tract, we have got information coming from the right side of the body, and over the left side of the tract, we have got the information coming from left side of the body. This is the lateral white column and this is the anterior white column. In the lateral white column, we have got this lateral spinothalamic tract, and over the anterior white column, we have got this anterior spinothalamic tract. Both of these tracts are crossed, and the neuron that is present in this tract is the second order neuron. When these are crossed tracts, this means that the tracts present over the right side has got information from the left side of the body, opposite side of the body, and tracts present on the left side has got information from the other side, the right side of the body. Now look at here. These are the ascending tracts named as the anterior spinocerebellar tract and the posterior spinocerebellar tract. These two tracts are present in the lateral white column, but one is present over the front aspect and one is present over the back aspect. This is the anterior spinocerebellar tract and this is the posterior spinocerebellar tract. Now I'll talk about the subcortical tracts, that is the anterior spinocerebellar tract and the posterior spinocerebellar tract. These tracts deal with unconscious proprioception and their destination is the cerebellum. They've got a first neuron, that is first order neuron, present in the same dorsal root of the spinal cord, and the name of this neuron is dorsal root ganglia. This first order neuron will enter the spinal cord and will synapse with the second order neuron that is present in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord here. And this second order neuron cell body, the name is Nucleus dorsalis or the Clark nucleus. From here, the second order neuron will ascend and will move towards its destination, that is the cerebellum. Important thing to note down is that nucleus dorsalis or Clark nucleus is present only in the thoracic and the lumbar region. Its extent is from C7 till the L3 spinal cord segment. Here is the second order neuron present. First order neuron get entry into the spinal cord at all the levels. Second order neuron is present somewhere in the center of the spinal cord, so the neuron that enter the spinal cord below the level of the nucleus will ascend. Will first find out the nucleus, then it will synapse with the second order neuron and then it will move towards the destination. Likewise, the neurons entering at the level above the nucleus will descend to synapse with the second order neuron and then the second order neuron will move towards the destination. Let us discuss this diagram. This is the cerebellum, which is present at the level of the brainstem. Brainstem consists of midbrain, pons and the medulla. Cerebellum has got connections with the midbrain. Fibers get entry and exit from the cerebellum and the midbrain, and that is known as the superior cerebellar peduncle. Likewise, from the pons, fibers may get entry and exit, and that is known as the middle cerebellar peduncle. And from the medulla, fibers may get entry and exit from the cerebellum, and the point is known as the inferior cerebellar peduncle. These structures are important to understand the anatomy and the course of the anterior and the posterior spinocerebellar tract. Now I'll show you how the second order neuron will proceed towards its destination. First, the posterior spinocerebellar tract. We've got a first order neuron. It will synapse with the second order neuron in the dorsalis nucleus. The second order neuron will ascend without crossing and will enter the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle of the same side. This is the posterior spinocerebellar tract. And now the anterior spinocerebellar tract. The fibers in this tract, secondary neuron, has got two options. Very few of them synapse in the Clark nucleus and ascend like the posterior spinocerebellar tract, but enter the cerebellum via the superior cerebellar peduncle. Majority of the neurons of the anterior spinocerebellar tract will first cross to the opposite side and then will ascend. They will ascend and will enter the opposite cerebellum via the superior cerebellar peduncle. But after entering the cerebellum of the opposite side, they exit this cerebellum via the middle cerebellar peduncle, and via the middle cerebellar peduncle, they reach the cerebellum of the same side. So this is the anterior spinocerebellar tract, which has got two type of neurons. We can also note down here that all the fibers of the anterior and the posterior spinocerebellar tract have reached the cerebellum of the same side, whether they cross to the opposite side or they don't cross to the opposite side. All the fibers' destination is the same side, cerebellum.